So what are the best and the worst ways to learn English? Let's dive right into it. The format of the tier list is one of my favorites here on YouTube because basically you have different sections, different tiers, so it's a ranking. I have selected some of the most common and the most frequent ways to learn English and languages in general, and I'm going to rank them. So I'm going to put them in a specific order according to what I think is useful or not. And this is of course based on my personal experience. This is subjective. You can of course disagree with this, absolutely. But this is something which is really fun to do, honestly. So basically at the top we have essentials. So in my opinion, what's going to be here is super important. It's a very important feature of the language learning process. Then we have very useful, so again, very important, good for our English experience. Good. All right, it's okay. Not too bad. So it's something that can help in some way. Useless. So things that we think give us any kind of advantage or help us, but in my opinion, not really. So let's start with literature. This one, in my opinion, depends a lot on the period. Like what type of literature we're talking about. If we're talking about Old English, or we're talking about, for example, Shakespeare, or we're talking about romantics. So considering what type of learner you are, it can be also very challenging. This would probably be better to deepen your knowledge or to find some very specific features of the language and learn more about the culture and the history. But yeah, I would probably put literature and poems in good, because for the language learning experience per se, I would probably use different materials, and this would probably be like more advanced already. But literature is beautiful. It's so beautiful. Watching TV shows or movies. I would love to, let's put it for now to very useful. In my opinion, getting this type of input is so great. You have variety, different accents, different people talking, different also paces, because people speak in a different way, and you can get different topics and so many possibilities. I'm quite torn between essential and very useful, but let's continue and let's see. But yeah, watching TV shows, again, it's not something I would recommend for beginners. I would probably recommend this to people who are in an intermediate kind of level. Talking with a teacher or a native speaker, or having some kind of one-to-one conversation. This one, honestly, I would put it in essential. And not because of the teaching part, but because of the exchange part, of the dialogue. When you speak with somebody who can give you feedback, that's so precious. And this happened to me also with Polish. When I moved to Poland, I spoke with a friend and she always checked my mistakes. She said, oh, this is not the way you say it. You should say it in another way. You should say it like this and not like that. And that was really helpful because I was getting constant feedback. You have the opportunity of speaking with somebody and you have to think about what you're going to say. You have to understand the other speaker. So it's a very important part of language learning in general, and that's probably the main reason why we learn languages, to communicate with another person. Moving to another country, I would say this is very useful. I wouldn't say it's necessary, like essential, because fun fact, I've never been to an English-speaking country before. But at the same time, I think that if you move to a country, you are kind of, I don't want to say forced, but you have probably stronger motivation. And motivation is number one when it comes to learning a language. When you are in a specific place where you need to function, you need to be a functioning adult, a functioning person, even teenagers or children, they need to understand the language. Even to go grocery shopping or to deal with documents, if you move for real, like seriously, to a country. In my opinion, it's very, very useful. And sometimes I wish I could go to an English-speaking country. The environment, the fact that you're surrounded by the language and in everyday conversation, in some kind of way, you get in touch with the language. In my opinion, it's super useful. Not necessary because you don't have to. You can, thanks to the internet, thanks to social media, you can get at an extremely good level. You can do so much with just the internet. So I wouldn't say it's essential, but it's very, very, very useful. At least if you do not isolate, if you decide to stay home, never get out, just being inside your room for the whole period, that's another story that doesn't even make any sense. But I'm talking about a person who's functioning outside their house and probably has to find a job, goes to work, etc., etc. Traveling. Here I would also say that for English, it's actually very useful. And I'm not saying that English is useful for traveling, but traveling is also useful for English. And the reason why I say this is because when you start traveling to communicate with others, you definitely need some kind of means, some kind of language, which could be a universal one. And speaking Italian, you can travel in Italy and you can travel maybe to different countries where there could be some tourists, there could be some immigrants, but if you travel in general, English is so safe to know. Chances are that people know something of English. And a lot of my students say that they want to learn English because of traveling, because they can speak with others. They can speak at the airport, they can speak with different people, they can speak in the country which they visit. So traveling is a good way to actually practice what you learn. It's a good way to also be motivated. The next one is listening to podcasts in English. Again, very useful, especially if you want to practice the listening skill. When you listen to podcasts, it's a lot of spoken language. It's a lot of listening, and usually they are not 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Podcasts can be 40 minutes, 1 hour, an hour and a half, 2 hours. A lot. You get a ton of listening. You can do your house chores. You can maybe relax and watch a podcast or listen to a podcast and do something. I would say that this is so good. I would say that podcasts are a great tool. And we have reading, blogs, and Reddit. So with reading, it's quite interesting. And I put blogs and Reddit and not specific books, because with blogs and Reddit, you get a more realistic language. You don't get the academic language, you don't get the standard English, you actually get also the slang. You get people who make mistakes. You see how people really write. And I would put this also in very useful. And I don't want to say essential, but some resources are like demonized because people say, oh, you can read from a book, you can read from an official page, a serious article, but sometimes reading something which is written by not an expert writer, but a normal person who just wants to share an opinion or ask for a question or start a discussion. You see the real language. And once again, language is to communicate, it's for communication. So we also need to understand some things that characterize the English language, even if it's not absolutely correct 100%. Listening to music. I could say, in my opinion, this could actually go into essential. And the reason why I say so, I'm probably biased because I love music. If I think about my experience with English, music was essential. Because with music, you have the element of repetition. It's something which, if you listen to a song you love that kind of activity. You don't feel stressed. You don't feel like it's a chore. You don't feel overwhelmed because it's a moment of peace, of relax. You can feel at ease. And if you read the lyrics and learn maybe by heart the lyrics and then you sing the song, you practice the language, you practice idioms, because a lot of idioms I have learned when I was a teenager, it was thanks to songs. You can practice different sentence expressions, phrasal verbs. You can practice also slang, which again, part of the language. In my opinion, songs have such a big variety, and the possibility of improving your English with songs, in my opinion, is huge. You have to find the right method. You have to find what suits you, what you find best for your personal taste and style of learning. But for me, music was essential. Like, my English skyrocketed when I started to listen to songs, learn them by heart, and also reading the lyrics at the same time. Learning apps. I'm currently trying ELSA, and for example, it's very nice. I've tried also Drops, and that's also quite nice. But for my personal experience, I can never stick to it. Like, I can't be very, very consistent with it. I don't know why. I struggle with consistency with apps because it's easy to practice, but it's also easy to say, I'll do it tomorrow because it's 10 minutes. So I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do 20. And then the day after, I'll do 30. And then you just feel so overwhelmed and you don't do it anymore. At least that's my situation. And I don't know, they're useful, and I have learned many Korean words. I have practiced French a lot. I keep practicing my English. I get some ideas also for my teaching session. I can't think of an app which really clicked in my language learning journey, in my English learning journey. I just can't say, that was the app. I have learned English with that. So I would say good. It's like between good and very useful. It depends on the app and also on probably your style of learning. Course book. I probably will shock somebody, but I'm going to say that to me a course book is essential. And this is especially if I'm talking about starter levels, beginner levels, also intermediate in some cases. Even if sometimes course books are a bit strange, some exercises are not probably the most logical ones. And sometimes we miss the practical aspect of the language learning experience. Some exercises are very artificial and they don't feel realistic, but at the same time, they give you an infrastructure. They give you a kind of guideline. And I've talked about this in one of my videos that I've done recently about how I would learn English if I started today. You have different exercises, and some are better, some are worse. If you were to learn a language, especially at beginner levels, without that kind of guideline, it would be very difficult. Next one, learning the top 1,000 words of a language. Oops. I know people will hate me for this, but in my experience, I have never used this technique. And whenever I tried, I don't know, 1,000 feels so overwhelming. And usually there are prepositions, there are, conjunctions. And in my experience, I learned these in a much easier way if I give myself context. And I still encounter these words when I look at a course book, if I speak with somebody, if I listen to music, I still encounter those words. So no, I'm a strong believer in learning from context. If you have context, putting myself through the process of learning the top 1,000 words of a language, I can't deal with this. For me, it's too much, and I would probably never get to doing it. And I would love to make a challenge about this, and maybe with a different language, but I can't find it, doesn't relate to my style of learning. I don't know, it's just very difficult for me. If you speak to yourself, I believe that you are aware. I have practiced for my entire life languages this way. So I just walk around the house, do my everyday stuff, and in the meantime, I try to speak a language. And then I notice I miss some parts, I miss vocabulary, I don't know how to express an opinion. And that's super useful because you see the gaps in your knowledge and then you can do some research upon it. And I've done a video, a demo of me trying to use this technique speaking French. It's my most viral video and I was shocked because it was me being goofy and a bit awkward, but a lot of you said that's exactly what I do, or that's exactly my experience. Is a game changer. So at least for me, because I can learn so much through my lack of knowledge and not knowing how to express something. Taking a course and getting a certificate. I would say that this can be also very useful. A certificate, again, is a very strong kind of motivator, and yeah, you get a certificate, you have to study. But at the same time, some people do it because of the job they want, or they have to move to a different country. So maybe, yes, you learn the language, but it's not maybe ideal. And some people just study to get the certificate. So they study not only the language, but also a system to pass the exam. YouTube. Hi, it's me. I kid you not, to me this is essential, and that's probably one of the core reasons why I have this channel. This is a great deal of how I have learned English. I spent so many afternoons, so many evenings watching tutorials, listening to people, and I've always enjoyed watching content on YouTube. I can't stress how important this is because it's not just the moment at school, the 3 hours a week of lesson that changes your perspective and your English. It's the everyday practice, and this never felt stressful. This never felt like something I had to do. It was in my free time. It was a very pleasant moment of my everyday life, and that's why probably I also have this channel now, because I love doing this. YouTube has been a great source of inspiration, also of learning materials. So for me, it's essential. Next one, we have flashcards. Flashcards, I would say they are good. I would say good because, again, I have never been a big fan of flashcards, and they're definitely useful. I have seen so many people using Anki and using flashcards to learn. For me, with my English learning experience, I've hardly ever used flashcards. Probably if I went out to study another language, I would probably use flashcards to try. They're like a lukewarm method for me. They're not the best, they're not the worst. For me, they're like, okay. But yeah, I know a lot of people love flashcards and they're learning thanks to flashcards. So I find them valuable, but probably it's not my cup of tea. Cartoons, I would say, if you're a beginner, I would put it even here. But in general, I would say that they're very useful. And the pacing is different, the style is different, but they can be super helpful to learn a language. So I would definitely try to find a cartoon which is nice. And they're easier than a TV show. So I put them in the same tier. But here I believe that it really depends on the level. So I would even say that for a beginner, cartoons are essential. Like, I would probably say it. Social media. Again, social media, you find English. Like, no matter how many things you see in your language, I always have something in English. Now, I mean, my social media, of course, it's mainly in English, but I find so much content in English everywhere. And I wouldn't say very useful because it really depends on the person and how you use social media. But in general, you can learn a great deal. The problem is that a lot of people learn more social media kind of slang and language and also mistakes and things that in an academic context are not okay. And if that's your only source, if that's your only source of learning, it can be problematic because there needs to be also a different kind of structure. So for me, it's a good tool, it's a useful tool, but it's not the only thing you need. And it also really depends on what kind of use you make of social media, always. Bulk studying once a week or once a month. So you sit and you just study a lot in a moment, like a deep dive, a deep focus moment, but you do it once a week. Probably, I would say not too bad. And I don't put this in useless, because if you repeat this kind of bulk studying, you learn something. It's not completely useless. But at the same time, I'm a strong believer of learning a little bit every day. And maybe you can have in your everyday learning process one day where you focus a lot. That's brilliant. That would be essential to me, would be very useful. But here, if you only study on Mondays, 2 hours of English every Monday, it's not bad. And absolutely not bad. The problem is that we lack the repetition. If your goal is to become very fluent or very good in different skills, you probably need more. You need more practice, or it will take you such a long time. I had this problem with French. I studied once a week, and I studied a lot, but it was once a week. So I couldn't retain a lot of information, and every week I had to revise what I did the past weeks. I couldn't internalize the language. So I would say not too bad, but we can do better. We can add some smaller sessions, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 times a week, and that would be brilliant. And in fact, studying regularly a little bit, I put it here. For the reason I've just mentioned now, everyday practice, super useful. If you combine bulk studying, maybe a deep dive, a deep focus kind of study one day, and all the other days you do 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. Learning a hobby or a skill in English, I kid you not, to me this is essential. I have learned how to do makeup and how to cook and how to do nails. And when you learn something through English, with English, it gives you somehow control over the language, and at the same time you don't focus on the language, you focus on the skill you're learning. And language doesn't become goal number 1, it becomes a means to learning something different. And for me, it was super valuable because I was watching a tutorial of, makeup, brush stroke, or tapping, or dusting off the excess, or any kind of vocabulary related to makeup. I was learning that vocabulary to understand the practical skill of doing my makeup. And of course, the vocabulary you get, it's quite specific, but it can truly apply to so many things, to so many different fields. Grammar. I have the section grammar. I would say that grammar is not... I would say good. Good. Because grammar is important, but the problem is if you consider grammar only, oftentimes it's considered the most important aspect and people neglect all that remains. And that's not good, in my opinion. So I would say grammar is good, it's important, but there's so much more than grammar. So much more. And then we have group. So being in a group and speaking with a group of people. I would put it in good. And again, it truly depends on the group. There are too many variables. Because group lessons are useful if you want to interact with different people, you want variety, and the people are at your kind of level. But if you go to a group and you don't understand anything about what they're saying, how they communicate, or if the group is even a group of friends, they have their internal jokes, they have their way of communicating, they have some kind of expressions they use, it can even be worse because it makes us feel extremely alienated. If the environment is friendly, if the language, the target language is the level we need, it could even be very useful. And that was it. I mean, I know there are many more elements that can be discussed. These are the most frequent ones that I came across. And I just want to say you can share what you think about this. If you agree with me or you disagree with me, this is based on my experience. So let me know what's your take on this, and I will see you soon with a new piece of content. Bye!